Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of others? If so, then you should consider becoming a recovery coach. Recovery coaches are trained to help people in recovery, seeking recovery, or struggling with addiction. They provide support, guidance, and resources to help people on their recovery journey. CCAR Training is the leading provider of recovery coach training programs. Our programs are designed to teach you the skills and knowledge, what we call the science, while giving you an understanding of your own art needed to be a successful recovery coach. We offer a variety of training options, most offered online. If you're interested in becoming a recovery coach or just learning more, I encourage you to visit our website or contact us today. We would be happy to answer any questions you have and help you get started on your journey to becoming a recovery coach. We hope you'll visit us at www.addictionrecoverytraining.org to learn more.
Are you in the recovery field and looking to expand your knowledge of the many pathways to recovery? Do you want to network with the nation's leading recovery leaders? If so, then the Multiple Pathways of Recovery Conference is for you. CCAR, Recovery Iowa, and the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services are bringing the message of multiple pathways to our friends in the Midwest. Join us August 21st through the 23rd at the Embassy Suites in Des Moines, Iowa for the National Recovery Conference, where we share and educate one another about the many different pathways, methods, practices, programs, and belief systems recoveries can use to enhance their recovery journey and sustain long-term recovery. Whether it's a 12-step, secular, a spiritual religious modality, medication-assisted recovery, or wellness-based and sober active communities, we've got you covered. At MPRC, you'll have the opportunity to connect with the recovery community, broaden your knowledge of the multiple pathways, and be refreshed in your journey of recovery, whatever that may be. So don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Tickets are on sale now at ccarconference.org. That's ccarconference.org. The Multiple Pathways to Recovery Conference, the National Recovery Conference, where all pathways to recovery meet.
This conference brought to you by CCAR, Recovery Iowa, paid for by State Opioid Response Funds, the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services Bureau of Substance Use, a award from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Join us on the Recovery Matters podcast, where we celebrate the power of resilience and explore multiple pathways to recovery.
Phil, I'm really excited about our guest today because we have spent a lot of time with her partner.
Yes.
And it's always kind of fun to get the other half of some stories.
Well, you two were talking before we even started. It seems like you've had this long-term relationship.
We bump into each other at things, but, you know, when you care about the same people, you're automatically connected.
Okay.
Plus, I've attended a lot of state virtual meetings with your daughter.
Yes.
Who's made an appearance.
You've done that too?
Yeah. Yep. Lennon has appeared on many Connecticut Alcohol and Drug Policy Council meetings.
I'm so out of the loop these days.
I don't tell you everything.
You don't tell me everything, and I don't want to know.
Oh. Well, there you go. I'll tell you even less. Welcome to the podcast, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
So this is where we say, introduce yourself to our audience and tell a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Taylor. I'm a person in recovery. Usually I say I'm an alcoholic, but I don't really discriminate too much on substances that I like to use or have in the past. So that's the gist of it.
Yes.
We really like to dive into like earliest childhood memories. Where were you born, raised, and anything you can remember from way back?
I have a really good memory of my childhood. I don't know if it's a result of...
That's like my sister,
yeah.
Right? You have a good one too, don't you?
No more.
No, I'm not.
I went over I'm 57. I went over the 55 speed limit, and things started to fall away.
I like that, the speed limit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of it's probably just like a result of PTSD and like childhood trauma, but I have memories being in diapers. I remember getting my diaper changed really young. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And who changed it?
I can remember my mother changing it.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
Wow.
So my parents, they had met in a 12-step recovery program. Mm-hmm. My father has been sober since he's 18, but not really working a program, so to say, just kind of hung around the rooms. I'm not sure how long my mom had been sober when my parents got together, but within 3-4 months, they were pregnant with me and married. So, my childhood, I have a lot of memories of two people who were struggling with their own stuff, trying to raise some kids, because then after me, they had 2 more, and the chaos that comes just generally with raising children.
And you're outnumbered.
Yes. And it was tough. And my mom was on her own a lot of it. My dad was around, but not really around. Like, my parents are still together to this day. And, I think for points of my life, I had a lot of resentment towards that.
So what do you mean around but not really around?
Like, my parents are not separated. My dad was working a lot, but not in the house a lot, or parenting from the couch. My parents didn't really share a bed or a bedroom for a long time. And, my mom, I remember having memories of like trying to get ready for school and her work in the morning, trying to get 3 kids together. And my dad is still sleeping. And she's like, the mania that is those moments. And can you help me out? And, in a half sleep, he's like, come on, guys, listen to your mom. So, and he had his own stuff too. A lot of rage in the house, things like that. So we moved around a lot. My parents would get separated often and not live under the same roof. And we would move in with my grandmother here and there. Or I remember we had a home that was provided to us by one of the women's shelters in Middletown. So a lot of instability.
So they were in recovery the whole time? Or would you say they were?
Substance free?
They were well, my mother, I was probably like, I remember being talked to at a young age, like, me and your dad don't drink. And not being told much more than that. I did have, most of my family is either in recovery or has been. My aunts, my uncles, cousins, everybody. So I kind of knew about being substance free. And then I remember at one point, maybe I was like 7 or 8, there were Zimas in the fridge. And I knew that Zima's totally boobies. and mom telling me that this is an adult beverage, and kind of connecting like, well, this is new. And not knowing much more than that. I mean, I can sort of think back and try to put more together than I could really understand at that point in time. But
And you also talked about the rage issues. So what did that look like?
My dad is someone who, and bless his heart, he can go 0 to 100 really quick. And 0 basically being, sitting on the couch, and 100 being like taking the TV off the wall and throwing it across the room, like that kind of rage. He didn't necessarily get like physical with us. I mean, he got scary enough, especially once I got older, and could talk back more. There were a lot of really pretty traumatic events that I could never really see most fathers doing to their daughters.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say why it pinged for me is that's been one of the things over 30 plus years of recovery that I've always been trying to work on my anger. And I think it did boil into rage. And not that I would physically hurt someone, but the emotional damage is hard to recoup from.
And I'll always remember the things that were said to me, the things that cut really deep.
There's only one time that I ever...
You made me go sit outside, you made me leave the house.
Oh, I like that.
I asked you to take... He tripped over, I don't know if it was for the dog or the baby game with a plate of food. And he wasn't directing his anger at anybody, but it was a kind of anger that I'd never seen and didn't think it was good for the kids to be around. But I relate to what you're saying because my siblings, I'm the youngest of 5 and I came 14 years later, and they would tell me that, my dad would, beat them over an infraction for a reason. But when I was growing up, I wished that he had spanked me because his rage and the words that came out to me felt far worse than if he laid hands on me.
Yeah.
And it, when that happens, when it goes anger, you know what anger is. Mad, you know what mad is. But rage is different. Scary.
Couldn't talk him off a ledge.
Yeah.
And it just you just have to wait it out. And like, I have much more understanding for it in general now, and a lot more compassion for my father. And I know he has his own unhealed trauma, his own childhood stuff that I would, love for him to work through. I don't know if he ever will, but I've definitely accepted him for who he is today and love him dearly. And I don't blame him today like I used to. Yeah.
Yeah, the old saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me is so wrong.
Yeah.
It's
right?
so wrong.
Yeah.
But that's the way we were trained.
Bones heal, bruises heal, but the words stay in your
And it takes a lot of work to work through that deep stuff, those internal wounds that are.
So what were some what was an incident like that you recall that sticks in your head?
I was probably like 15, 16, and remember when he like spat in my face.
Yeah.
And then, called me a promiscuous, curse word. It cut really deep, especially, and he's not, again, very good at like articulating, I'm sorry for this.
Yeah.
And we would go maybe a month without speaking a word to each other.
Just like cold silence.
And then one day he'd be like, I'd like to take you to dinner this weekend. I'd like to take you shopping.
Yeah.
And make up for it that way. And while that was sweet, I mean, I understood what he was doing, and he couldn't really. And it was only one time. I remember being drunk when I was about 18, and my drunk dialed my father, and just kind of like let it out there, like, you did this to me. And he was super receptive towards it. And I'm like, I've never heard you say, I love you. And he was like, well, I do love you, and I'm sorry. It was the first time I heard my father say, I'm sorry.
Oh, and at least you weren't so drunk that you didn't remember it. You were kind of black so that you remembered it. Oh, there's so many emotions with that, with fathers and daughters and fathers and children. And they don't go, it just is.
Yeah.
I remember standing in the driveway of my parents' home at age 26, and they were moving to Florida. That was the first time my dad told me he loved me.
Yeah.
And I know he loved all of his kids,
right,
passionately, but we all either are destined to repeat whether we want to refer to it as the sins of the father,
right,
or mindfully change it of how we interact with the next generation.
Yeah.
And nothing hurts me more than recognizing the moments when I've perpetuated one of my parents' faulty behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my sister often talks about my dad, who was prone to anger. I don't think he could say some things that were hurtful, but overall he was a good, kind-hearted man. There was one time my sister worked at a lifeguarding job, and she was at a summer camp, and the kid got picked up late, and so she had to ride her bike home in the dark, which was a few miles on a busy road. My dad was furious. And so my sister had this reaction. She said, if I'm going to get in so much trouble for being good, God damn it, I'm going to get in trouble for being bad. And that's kind of like when she took this little turn, like diverted off the path. So you just don't, those bursts of anger are never helpful. They're never helpful.
No.
Things said in anger.
And I've gotten better in as I've gotten older and, work in the program, lots of therapy. Yeah. It's been easier for me to set boundaries when he reaches those moments and saying, this is not something I'm going to tolerate, entertain, engage with. We can talk later, but I'm not going to do this right now.
Do you say that to him?
Yeah.
Because actually, it's funny you mention that, because recovery coach performance support that I do in each of the centers is about boundaries. Mm-hmm. So I would ask you exactly, okay, how do you manage that? And you did it by telling him your truth without blame or judgment.
Right.
So that I can't do this right now.
Yep.
So we can talk later after you've calmed down, and leave it at that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's worked out really well.
Yeah.
He might get a little bit more mad at me, but he doesn't get more hurtful.
No.
And he does really respect that usually when I set that boundary.
Because that's your truth. It's hard to argue with.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone's got to be the adult sometimes.
So we were talking right before the podcast started about when you started first use, because I was saying there's this trend of age 11 that I hear again and again. So I'm kind of curious, as you talked about the dynamic between your parents and moving back and forth. You said you were around age 13.
Yeah, when I started smoking weed. And I remember before smoking weed for the first time, being so against it. I was very afraid. I was definitely sort of like brainwashed by the DARE, program of the 90s, like, don't smoke pot, you'll turn into, the flat girl on the couch and
laying in the gutter. Yeah.
So I remember like the year before I first being petrified of it. And then I'm not too sure what happened in 8th grade that made me switch a little bit. I could maybe pinpoint a couple things, but who really knows? And started smoking pot and smoking pot fairly heavily. Like me and my girlfriends, who all kind of came from sort of similar situations, and we're always kind of getting into trouble together, but really helping each other through things too. At the same time, we just really loved the feeling of getting high. Loved it. So, and then it wasn't until I was the end of my freshman year in high school that I started drinking.
Had you, what kept you from drinking in middle school?
It wasn't accessible. The people I was hanging around with weren't drinking. It wasn't something that we were seeking at that point. But things were different in high school. When we started hanging out with older people and the older boys, and they were drinking and they were really cool. And I started seeing my high school boyfriend, who I was infatuated with. It was a very codependent relationship. Like, we were living together by my sophomore year. And he drank and he smoked cigarettes. So I started drinking and smoking cigarettes.
So how do you end up living with a boyfriend in high school?
Well, I think you can kind of, like, my home life was unstable. And my parents really didn't set a lot of their own boundaries, expectations, discipline. Like, if I said, even at a very young age, my mom was dealing with a lot of her own depression, and being able to put up a fight was hard with kids. And I remember being in kindergarten saying, I don't feel like going to school today. And she would be like, that's okay. So, and it grew into high school. And I started seeing my boyfriend, who was older. And at the time, he had a 2-month-old when we got together. So I know it's crazy when I look back at my life.
Out of curiosity, how much older?
He was 18. I was 15. Okay. So it wasn't, we were in high school, but older, just old, in different experience. I was a little baby freshman. And my mom, thank goodness she did this. She said, okay, I'm not going to stop this from happening. And I know I definitely can't stop you from having sex. So I want you to get on the pill. This is what we're going to do. And it was kind of the same thing with drinking. She's like, I knew I couldn't stop you from drinking. And she had lost her 18-year-old brother from presumably a drunk driving accident. It was a car accident. And she just said, I don't care what time of night it is. Just call me and I will pick you up. Just don't sneak out and don't not tell me where you are. Don't keep secrets from me. Yeah.
It's fascinating for me when you're talking about knowing that you didn't have boundaries, that you could kind of just go do what you wanted to do, that your parents weren't good at setting those. I was trying to think about my situation, and I think my sister and I both lived in this house where I don't know that they were ever said, but we knew we couldn't do it. I don't know if they were self-imposed or if, I don't think my dad ever, if it came from anywhere, it came from my mother, who might have said, you're not going to drink until you're old enough to, but I don't know. We had that in our head. So anytime I was like drinking as a teenager, I knew I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that was ever actually said to us.
Oh, my rules were
Clear?
said and
Well, you broke them anyway. After a while.
at 17.
At
Yeah.
7.
So I was a late bloomer, but like I couldn't wear the color black. I couldn't wear dungarees. Wow. Got my eyebrows plucked in 7th grade by my hairstylist sister. My dad called me a hooker. Like there was a bazillion rules. Bazillion rules.
Yeah, that was one of the only, just tell me where you're going to be. Just be transparent with me. And the first time I got drunk was I lied to her about where I was, me and the girls, that I'm at this person's house and same thing, down the line. And one of our friends' moms called the other and it all blew up in our face. And we were sleeping in this party house. It was a huge party. They were carding people at the door. And because my boyfriends were friends with these people, we were able to get in at 15. But waking up, first hangover, and my mom's like, "Where are you, Taylor?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm at Jenny's house." She said, "Try again." And I went, "What, Mom? I can't hear you." Click. She got together with one of my other girlfriend's moms, and they drove around looking for us until we finally came clean and had them pick us up. And they said, "I would have let you go if you had just been honest with me."
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're dating someone with a baby too. That's got to be.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot for me to unpack there. Therapy. Of why I thought that was ideal, but I totally embraced being a 15-year-old stepmom. Completely embraced it. Looking back, it's like, why did I was just so self-righteous, right? Because I would communicate on his behalf with the mother of his child who could, I know.
No, I'm nodding because not the same scenario, but very close. I did the same thing.
Yeah. But I could almost reason with her better. And there wasn't, the history of whatever they went through before. So she preferred to communicate with me too. So I would get home from school on Wednesdays and his daughter would be getting dropped off at 5:00 and I would be there to greet her until my ex-boyfriend came home from work and shower, and then we'd all play together as this little makeshift family. Yeah.
How old was the mom?
She was his age, yeah. He had a really tough time when we broke. Again, we were very, very codependent. And when we broke up, he basically stopped seeing his daughter. And a couple years went by and he eventually signed over rights and she was adopted by her stepfather. So he doesn't have a relationship with her. And for me to move on, I needed to cut out every aspect of him in my life. It took me like a solid year. And I remember telling my friends, whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't tell me. I need to move on from this. And it was tough. Yeah.
So were you together all through high school?
We broke up towards the end of my senior year. And we dabbled. That was really when we broke up. But there was still relations post my senior year. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But you graduated.
Yes, I did. By the skin of my teeth. I wasn't supposed to. So come my sophomore year, drinking had taken over my life. I was not going to, I was a truant, stopped going to school, was drinking at home. And come November, the school was like, so you're not going to be a junior at this point. You could repeat your sophomore year or drop out. And those weren't really options for me. So my mom's from Texas. I moved in with my cousin in Fort Worth, who was sober for several years at this point. I'm not sure how long, because I, at that point in time, wasn't interested in her recovery and what that looked like. And she could look at what was going on really easily and say, okay, we have some sort of substance use problem here. And I thought I had a going to school problem. So she was like, okay, you're going to go to Alateen. And I'd basically be dragged to AA because she was going to AA. And I remember really identifying with these people and their stories, but couldn't even fathom abstinence. It wasn't even in my vocabulary. But so I was there from January to the end of the school year, went on to my junior year back home in Connecticut, and Then in February, my brother and father were involved in a really severe gasoline explosion where my brother almost died. He was in a coma for a month, and my mom was in the hospital with him for the next 4 months. My dad was okay. He was only in the hospital for 2 weeks. Most of his burns came from trying to put out my brother's fire, but any normalcy that we had in the house was gone at that point because my brother needed care. Like, he's a very evident burn survivor, and we're so grateful that he's alive, but he needed a lot of care post that point in time, and that became my mother's life.
So, Taylor, it's like too much. Too much. So
there's a little trauma.
Yeah, but just tell me about what was the situation where the gasoline exploded? What was it?
Yeah, so my dad owns a tree business, and at the point in time, we lived in Marlboro, and we lived on a huge piece of property, 6.5 acres. And in the back, he was like splitting wood back there one February day, and my brother got off the bus at school. He was 10 years old at the time, and was like, I want to go hang out with my dad. And growing up in the woods, there was a fire in a barrel, and that's not abnormal for living in the sticks. And my brother Jordan said, you make it bigger. My dad poured gasoline on it. Again, this is a normal occurrence for living in the middle of the woods. And the fumes ignited and the canister exploded. And my brother was wearing a nylon coat, so it sunk into his skin. But again, we lived on this big piece of property, so there was a little pond right next to where this happened. So my dad got my brother in the pond, put out the fire.
And he was 10, so you were
16.
16.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how's your brother today?
Awesome.
That's a good answer.
He's so awesome. Yeah. Still, like, you can tell he's a burn survivor. Mm-hmm. But God, he's got one of the greatest hearts. Like, I get emotional about my brother.
Good.
Because he's just an amazing person. And it took a long time for him to get to a place of acceptance and self-love. Like, there was a point, he didn't want to do picture day, after the accident. And now it's like nothing stops him. He's in MMA, so he trains really hard throughout the year. The kid will run like 14 miles every day and then go train. And women love him. And it's like, I've gone to him, we've traveled together, gone to like music festivals together, and the women flock to him. And he has serious girlfriends, and he lives this independent life in Cape Cod. And I'm so proud of him, and everything that he has overcome is just such an inspiration. Yeah.
Okay.
As a parent, that's like,
yeah.
I usually left speechless, but anyway, let's, so you're 16 as it's happening, and this is just
I'm 16 at this point. Junior year.
No wonder why we go get high and all that kind
right.
of stuff.
So with my mom in the hospital with him, and my dad not being at home often, my home became the party house. Yeah. And I was throwing parties every weekend. And not that my house was necessarily like a clean home before. My dad has some hoarding stuff. We destroyed the house, basically, at that point. It was destroyed. Some years later, it ended up, it's condemned. It's not good. And it wasn't good. So then I ended up moving out when I was 18.
So you graduated high school?
Graduated, because I think they just felt bad for me at that point. I did have some absences and had to go to these truancy meetings, and my principals were like, well, you had a lot going on, so you can get out of here.
What did you do after high school?
I would have loved to have gone to college. But I didn't even know how to fill out a college application. I had no skills. I wasn't like, let's go look at some schools, or I can help you fill out an app. That wasn't things that happened in my house. So I was like, I don't know, I guess I'm 18 now. What do we do? I guess we go get a job somewhere. What skills do I have? Like, I'm a young girl and can talk, so I'll go get a waitressing job. So I went and applied at Chili's. So I was working there, and I met people who were a lot like me. like the restaurant industry is kind of filled with lots of dysfunctional people who are also
Party people.
right, party people, socially open. And I was exposed to this. We like leveled up my drinking career, and I drank alcoholically from the beginning. But now it's like sort of like this adult way. We work and then we go get a drink after work, like refined people. But you can get as drunk as you want because you're over 18 now, and you don't have the same. And the people I'm hanging out with don't live with their parents and stuff. So I'm with adults now, and I'm drinking how partying adults drink.
Yeah.
And then I was 21 when, maybe 21, when I was then exposed to cocaine, because we drink like fish, don't sleep a lot. You can, one, use cocaine to keep the party going. And if you need to sober up a little bit, cocaine apparently helps you.
You leveled up.
Level up again. And that was kind of most of my 20s, was like, what's this drug like? And what does that do for me? Or here's a downer for an upper, and vice versa.
Right.
Lots of experimenting. Yeah.
We think of it as leveling up at the time, but we're leveling down.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
No. I just didn't have the ability to think of it like that. Or
Did I?
And I would, in between all that, I would go and take classes at MCC and try to get some credits and figure out what I want to be when I grow up, right?
Right.
In balancing that with my work life, my party life, I still haven't finished my bachelor's because I've just been so sporadic with school and trying to piece together normalcy that I didn't have the tools to piece together.
Let me just say 28 years to get my bachelor's, so no shame in however
I
you
just
do it.
signed up for school again, so we'll see.
Good for you.
We'll see.
I would take a class, get pregnant, have a baby, take a few years off. So
Right.
be ready for the second child now that you're enrolled.
We're getting back on the pill. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does this all progress towards recovery?
So my 20s were kind of just like that roller coaster. Like, my life would spiral out of control because of drugs and alcohol. I'd muster up whatever courage, self-worth. I don't even know what to call it, to sign up for classes. And then the cycle would repeat for years. I'd get into a relationship that was also codependent, abusive, that kind of stuff. And after my last really abusive relationship, I was really just a shell of a human. And I was just so desperate to not feel depressed that I sought out therapy. And my therapist was absolutely amazing. And with some heavy work with her for a few months, again, went back to school, got this internship. I'm getting straight A's. Like, I'm in the gym all the time. I am just crushing it at life. And what do I do to repay myself but drink my life into the gutter? And it happened really fast. That summer, I was a complete waste case. I ended up going to work wasted, doing drugs behind the bar. It was just insanity. And I lost my job that October because you can't really be the drunk bartender for too long. And at that point, my reputation around town was the drunk bartender, so I couldn't find a job. For several months, I was living, paying my bills by the graces of my friends, eating by the graces of my friends, literally bringing me bags of food so I could eat. And it was just a really dark several months. And
You talked a lot about the codependence with the first relationship and then abusive relationships. What did you learn about you and all that?
That probably didn't come until recovery. I mean, there were some things that I learned along the way. Like, I couldn't make sense out of things that don't make sense. And if I engage in that, how could someone do this to me? How could you do this to someone you love? I'm just going to drive myself even more crazy when the actual goal is trying to distance myself from this situation, and getting to that place of this is what I need to do to move on, or things that I learned before recovery. And then in recovery, a lot of the things that I was able, like, it's easy for me to look at a man who hurt me and go, this is what you did to me and this is what's wrong with you. But then in a 4-step, what is it about me that continues to attract these types of people? Am I the problem here? And I was a big, huge part of that problem. Yeah.
Was your codependent relationship abusive at all, would you say? Or the first one?
Not, I laugh with its trauma response. Yeah. Not in a way that I thought I was going to die, but also in a way that wasn't necessarily healthy. Like there was shoving and stuff. And I remember being like dragged out of a party and he'd throw me over his shoulder and throw me into the car and then be doing 90 and back roads of Marlboro. So it was crazy. It was crazy. But not where I feared differently for my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she and I are looking at each other because the story is so familiar.
Yeah. My story is back roads along the river in Rocky Hill.
With a much older man.
Yeah. You have no food, no job.
Yep. So at that point in time, I just think I've been dealt a bad hand at life. I can't really look at the circumstances of my life and go, maybe this has to do with drinking. I think what I need is a man. So of course. So
Harry works for me.
Right. And so I tried this online dating thing that all the kids were trying at the time and still are.
Which one is that?
It was on Bumble. Yeah.
The Bumble?
I don't know how to do that.
And
exactly.
And it was fun because you can just swipe. And you're like, good looking, not good looking. Ooh, cute, whatever. But I had never done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I met up with this guy and had my friends come out and meet me because I knew this is not someone I wanted to sleep with or whatever. I wanted to be safe because I knew I was going to have a drink with him. What I did know about my drinking at that point in time was I don't have the right formula yet to control myself when I drink. I don't know what I'm really capable of doing when I start drinking.
Cannot safely predict the outcome.
No, right. I have no idea what could occur. But what ended up happening was he actually roofied me. And I wound up in the hospital. And the worst part, this is what did it for me, was that my friends didn't believe me. Because they're like, you just blacked out and don't know what you did. And that was when I could really look at my alcoholism, or I couldn't even call it alcoholism yet. I maybe had a problem with alcohol, so let's try some more controlled drinking. So then I was doing Coke sober and then, other things. And then, okay, let's try having one drink and not being able to have just one drink. So the last night I drank, I remember I was going to a party and I told myself I'm not going to drink that night. And I couldn't leave my house without a road soda, and still told myself that night that I'm sober because I just drank on the way to the party, but not at the party. That made sense to me at the time. But then, of course, the same thing that always happened was I was up all night doing Coke and getting wasted, and it's 6 a.m. and I feel like shit, and I'm like, here we are again. When is my life going to be something I'm proud of and happy in? When am I going to have money in my bank account? When all of the things. And that was the last time I drank.
Wow.
Yeah.
When was that?
That was May 19th, 2019. Yeah.
And so how did you start your recovery, and how do you maintain it?
So that day, at that point, I was like, let's try Bumble again. Because, the definition of insanity, right? So, and I ended up talking to a few guys who were clean and sober and had long-term sobriety, and I found that attractive, at least. And I'm kind of telling one of these guys this conundrum I'm in, and he could see it for what it was. He's like, why don't you try going to a meeting? And I said, well, I don't think I'm powerless over alcohol, and I can't get down with the whole God thing. And the second I said powerless, I was like, who the fuck are you kidding? Like, who are you kidding? You're not powerless over alcohol. So I'm like, all right, let me check this out. So I looked up a meeting, and I found one in Windsor called Sunlight of the Spirit, and had no idea what that meant, but it sounded like it's what I needed. And I went to this meeting, super old timer meeting. And, I raised my hand when they asked if we have any newcomers. And I said, my name is Taylor, and I don't know what I need, but I need some help. And one of them looked at me dead in my eyes. I'll never forget it. And he said, well, take care of your kid. And I just felt, for the first time in my life, like I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I was in the right place at the exact right time. Yeah. And so then I threw myself into an AAIOP. And I was like, this is awesome. These people have the answers that I've been looking for. I still don't have the answers, but they have them somehow, and I need to find them. So I'd go to like 3 to 5 meetings a day, and I would just bounce around the state. And that's how I got sober and stayed sober.
I thought for sure you were going to say you went on your first date with that guy to an English meeting.
Oh, he was from Connecticut, but he was living somewhere else at the time. But he was someone I did, like, I guess, bounce AA stuff. All the romanticism went out at that point. He was someone, yeah.
That was how we began our dating relationship.
I love that you said AAIOP, which is Alcoholics Anonymous intensive outpatient. But that's not a formal treatment program.
No.
Did you ever go to a formal treatment?
Never. I could have benefited from one, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I didn't go to one, and you haven't gone to one. So a lot of times...
Think about I missed out.
I know.
Yeah.
Especially if I could pick the one.
Right.
Or I missed out on a mugshot, too. Sometimes I feel like...
Well, you think about how much pain you'd have to be to go into it. But you can go to a treatment now if you want it.
I want to go to Eric Clapton's in Antigua.
Cool. That's awesome.
Taylor and I are going to go.
Yeah.
So you went to a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for...
But now that I have the wonderful gifts that recovery is giving me and a job and that I love and being employable, and, I have a relationship and I have a toddler, and I have not found the balance yet of how to balance going to meetings, attending meetings regularly with the rest of my life.
I think that's what really shifted for me because the core of my recovery was 12-step as well, was when we had our first child and I first started bringing the baby to meetings, and then that wasn't feeling so comfortable because a lot of smoke stuff still around back then.
Yeah.
And then Phil bringing the meeting into our house. So we had a meeting at that house for a while.
That's a good idea, actually.
Then when we had the second child, just trying to find a place for the family to fit in. And that wasn't always necessary. Sometimes a little messy, right?
Yeah.
To be around young children. I think that's what really opened me up to the multiple pathways of recovery and figuring out different seasons of life require different tools, different pathways.
Totally agree.
What you're navigating. And
yeah. Like I'm still in therapy, and I'm with that. I was able to find that same therapist who basically helped save my life when I was getting out of a really bad relationship, and she's just as wonderful, if not even more wonderful. And the work that we're doing has just had profound effects on my life. Yeah. And I still have a sponsor. Still sponsor women. Yeah. So I stay at least connected to AA, a foot in AA, but my regular attendance at meetings. Yes.
Well, what I've always had the question about, the people would preach to us to say, if you don't keep your recovery first, you'll lose everything. I agree with that. But to them, recovery was attendance at 12-step meetings was mandatory.
Right.
And no one was ever able to answer the question. We were raising 4 kids. And, we didn't get sober to be absent from our family and our kids. So even Bill Wilson called AA a spiritual kindergarten.
Right.
That you set a really solid base, and we've built a life beyond measure. I'm 35 years in recovery now, and my attendance at meetings last few years has been non-existent. I mean, there's been online meetings and things like that. But I still think my recovery is as strong as ever,
Well, you're still living in fellowship with people in recovery. And that just takes many forms.
Too.
Yeah.
And, but I was also brainwashed that your work is not your recovery.
Right.
And I was like, well, and they say you have to have a work-life balance. And to me, it's all about life. My work is my life. It's my life. So it's all one. It's not, I can't compartmentalize like that. That's not for me. I can't say, CCAR's my work. Okay, I work here from 9 to 5. I clock out. Now I'm at home, and it's my home life. It all gets blended together because it's all one thing.
And I think that's what the 12-step is really all about, is practicing these principles in your affairs. Like, how many times can you really do the steps and something new is going to come up? And I think, again, that's a point where you can level up your method of recovery, your pathway. And right now, therapy is serving me really, really, really well.
And then when I was, I went to a lot of therapy too early in recovery to discover not so much, we talk a lot about the past, but it was to figure out how I thought about things.
Right.
And can I think about things differently that's more helpful and more healthy in a lot of ways. And I have been able to do that, And
the therapy that we're doing right now is called internal family systems therapy, which is the idea that as your self-being is made up of like different parts. And for me, a lot of my parts can operate in extremes or complete deprivations. And the idea of this therapy is to find a balance in all of these things. And the function of those parts, what they're really trying to do is function in a way that they think is serving me. And sometimes it's protecting another part of me. And usually that's that like little Taylor in here that has some unhealed stuff and needs to be seen and loved and heard. And it can sometimes bash with that AA brainwashing mind that's like, no, that's your disease and it wants you dead. And you need to run from that part. And I don't always need to run from that part. I need to almost hug the cactus and see what it's really trying to do for me.
Yeah, I get that completely. Growing up, so because I was so young, there was mostly, all my siblings were almost on the verge of being an adult or an adult. And so each one of them left me by the time I was 8 years old, right? And then in my 30s, into 40s, both parents passed away and two siblings, and then another sibling passed away. So as my kids have grown and graduated college, they've moved far away. So all of that is such a trigger for me, but I don't drop to the depths of where it would take me because I have recovery tools, but man, it still keeps flaring. So I think we often, without somebody to ask you good questions, whether that's a therapist or a recovery coach, just to get you realizing those connections and that you might not be responding because of the moment. You're responding because that moment is bringing back all those other prior moments that you never really fully resolved.
Activating.
So I'm wondering, as a mom,
I leveled up in my fears.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So I've always felt like I have to really purposefully do things different. I have to be thinking about doing
very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. It came, I didn't think having a child I'd be as worrisome as I am as a mother. I am constantly, we call it like hypervigilance, like whether it's, I'm afraid of the world, and that can also be a result of the religious upbringing I have. We won't even get there. But I can be like, I will be looking over my shoulder in a grocery store and a parking lot when I'm putting her in her car seat. It's not things like, I'm not afraid of like germs in the house, but I'm afraid that something terrible can happen to her. And another thing that I've been working through for therapy, but in 12-step recovery, I remember like in pregnancy, even dealing with these things. And one of the things that served me best was my spiritual condition and really asking for these things to be removed. Really working a really heavy 6 and 7 step. And that has yielded me consistent results and being easier to combat those fears or them not being so common. But they definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I put my faith into practice, and I didn't even know I wouldn't have called it a faith back then, was being pregnant with the first child, terrified that something horrible was happening inside my body that would lead to not having a beautiful, healthy baby, that I had to pray every day was my way to calm the anxiety. And then, over time, and then I think as they grow away from you, to reflect on the fact that we don't control their journey through life is freaking hard.
I can't imagine. I think
about that part. Yeah.
I think about it all the time, though. But one of the things that does, when I was pregnant, I was really excited about having a girl, and then one day had the thought, like, oh my God, I'm having a girl, and being so riddled with, what if she has the same experience as I do? What if she grows up feeling the way that I did? And being so overwhelmed by that fact, and looking at the life that TJ and I have built today, I'm so proud and thankful, and have a lot more faith that she's going to be okay, even if she ends up being an alcoholic. Like, both Blennon has never seen drinking, period. She has no exposure to it whatsoever. And I think she has a few legs up from where TJ and I were as kids.
You're talking about, I've learned not to play the what if game. That's not helpful. Even when I facilitate the Recovery Coach Academy, a lot of people want to go with what if, and that what if is fear-based. Yeah. Right? But you could also play the what if game. What if this child grows up and is extremely well-loved, which is my intention. You can only be sure of your intentions, right, as a parent. I know I love my kids, and I love them every day, that all the time that we had them, to the best of my ability. Was I always perfect at it? No. But my intention was to love them as best I could. I think that was always been your intention too.
No, I was to be perfect.
Oh, I know. You have to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. But there is a spirituality.
Way short of that.
Well, I don't believe that for a second. But I think what you're talking to about childhood is, I've learned that the way I responded was the way I responded. And there was some real strengths in the way I coped with what I was dealt. So, and people just respond the way they do to survive. And for me, recovery is a journey of self-awareness. So I encourage you and applaud you and admire the steps you're taking to become more and more self-aware. And because as you become more and more self-aware, that's really what recovery is.
Right.
Right? There's no bad or good. There just is. There might be, this is a healthier decision than this one I'm going to make, so maybe I'll choose to make the healthy decision. But I might make the unhealthy one, and I'll be okay with that, because I am going to eat more potato chips. That's just what I'm going to do.
Right.
I could eat carrots, but I'm going to eat potato chips.
I identify with that. Potato chips are delicious.
Yeah, right? So is that the healthiest decision I could make? Probably not, but I'm well aware of that.
So what are you looking forward to in the next phase?
Well, I just signed up for school again. So my thinking is, I'd love to have another child in the future. I mean, I have a very willful, high-spirited husband
and child.
And my natural way of living is, let's avoid some stress here. And so we'd like to have a child probably in like 2-3 years. We'd also like to buy a house. Yeah. We'd also like to get married. So all of these things that I want to do, I can't imagine having an easier ability to finish school when those things are happening. So my goal right now, we're going to get this degree finally, and then probably buy the house, then maybe get married, and then have another baby. That's the plan.
How do you take care of your recovery today?
My day-to-day is definitely lacking. My day-to-day. The one thing I do have also is staying connected to the people that I value most in my recovery. Still keeping a relationship with a sponsor and other women that really helped save my life, and staying connected with my sponsees who I learn from every day. And staying really everyone that is in my close circle of people are all in recovery. So staying connected to them has been key. Having a partner who is so incredible in his own recovery and helping so many people has been really helpful too. Not that in like he's my sponsor type of way, but I need to bounce this off of you, and I need help kind of articulating this thought. And he's also always been so supportive. Like he understands that it is hard to make meetings all the time, but he is always really, really encouraging. Like, I'll watch the baby tonight, go to a meeting.
So you say day to day is, you use the term lacking.
Yeah, I think
so. What part do you think is lacking?
I think, again, from being AA brainwashed, I would probably not get an A+ in AA today in terms of, are you praying and meditating every day? Are you doing a 10-step every day? Are you, 10-step in a lot of, are you reflecting on the day? Are you making amends where you need to? But I think in terms of living a true 12-step,
yeah,
I think I'd get an A+.
So the AA taught me what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So what's your spiritual condition like?
I think my spiritual condition is pretty good.
So then you're not lacking.
Yeah. The great thing about, having Lennon and being really routine about her, we say prayers every night. Oh, that's cool. We have a whole nighttime routine, and being able to pass along spirituality to her that isn't rooted in necessarily a religion.
Or
but,
rules.
Right. And just that this is here for you to just talk has been one really helpful, and it is something that we do religiously daily. And
that's where that came from.
Yeah. And I think I don't always, my relationship with a higher power it's always taking twists and turns. Yeah. But I think having a faith that works for me has been key, and knowing it's something that's always there that I can turn in on, and realizing I have innate abilities that are God-given, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And trusting those things, but not having to pray and meditate so desperately like I did, a few years ago. And not that I couldn't benefit from it, but still always doing things that also are helping better myself, but not always in what I can sometimes see as the strict confines of AA.
Yeah.
Well,
I think spirituality too is, I resonate with what you're saying about desperate. I thought it was the harder you worked at it, the deeper you would get, and it's not that difficult.
No.
You just have to let go, really, and just open up. And you talked about that a little bit, and just let it in.
Yeah,
let it in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is cool. It went by fast, faster than I thought.
Thanks, Taylor.